I'm Brooke Parker, 26 years old, and last Tuesday my parents disowned me over apple pie. The dinner was supposed to celebrate my promotion, but instead, I watched my father's face harden as he told me I no longer had a home. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes as they gave me 30 minutes to pack my belongings. 10 years of building my career shattered by one family dinner. Before I tell you how my entire life collapsed over dessert, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family turn their backs on you when you needed them most. Growing up in Mapleton, Indiana meant certain expectations were set in stone. Our family wasn't wealthy, but we lived comfortably in a 3-bedroom ranch house on Elm Street. My father, Richard Parker, worked as a manager at the local manufacturing plant, while my mother, Diane, taught 2nd grade at Mapleton Elementary. We attended church every Sunday, had dinner together every night at 6 p.m. sharp, and vacation meant a week at my grandparents' lake house 2 hours away. From an early age, the plan for my life was clearly laid out: graduate high school, attend the local community college or state university, find a nice boy from a good family, settle in Mapleton, and start producing grandchildren. My parents weren't necessarily unkind about these expectations, they truly believed this path would lead to happiness. After all, it had worked for them. The first cracks in our relationship appeared when I received a full scholarship to Northwestern University in Chicago. It was an opportunity beyond anything anyone in our family had ever achieved, first-generation college student headed to a prestigious university. While they smiled for photos and told neighbors how proud they were, in private, there were concerns about big city values and me getting ideas above my station. Still, I went. Those 4 years transformed me from a shy small-town girl into someone with ambition and confidence. I majored in marketing with a minor in digital media, interned at prestigious firms, and by graduation, had secured a position at Horizon Digital, a fast-growing marketing agency in downtown Chicago. The physical distance between Chicago and Mapleton, just under 3 hours by car, gradually became an emotional chasm. Each visit home grew more strained. My parents couldn't relate to my work stories, while their small-town gossip no longer held my interest. When I brought home my first serious boyfriend, Thomas, who happened to be biracial, the tension nearly snapped. Nothing overtly racist was said, but the cool reception and awkward questions made it clear he wasn't welcome. We broke up 6 months later, though for unrelated reasons. Over the next 4 years, I built my career at Horizon Digital, working 60-hour weeks and climbing the corporate ladder faster than I dared hope. My visits home dwindled to major holidays and the occasional birthday. Phone calls with my mother became a Sunday ritual, but they were increasingly filled with pointed questions about when I was coming to my senses and stopping this career nonsense. 2 weeks ago, everything changed. I was called into the executive conference room where the CEO and department heads announced my promotion to senior brand strategist. This role would put me in charge of our largest accounts, with a substantial salary increase, but also required frequent travel and even more responsibility. I was ecstatic. At 26, I was the youngest person ever appointed to this position. That evening, buoyed by champagne and congratulations from colleagues, I called my parents with the news. My mother's response was tepid at best. "That's nice, dear. Speaking of news, why don't you come home this weekend? We'll have a special dinner to celebrate." Something in her voice sounded off, but I chalked it up to the poor connection and my own excitement. The drive to Mapleton that Saturday afternoon filled me with a mixture of anticipation and dread. I'd splurged on a new outfit for the occasion, a tailored navy blazer, silk blouse, and designer jeans that projected successful young professional. I'd even bought an expensive bottle of wine to share with dinner, something my beer and occasionally whiskey father would probably mock but might secretly appreciate. When I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, the first warning sign appeared. Both my parents' cars were there, but no others. I'd half expected they might have invited extended family or old neighbors to celebrate my achievement. Instead, the house looked exactly as it always did, with no indication of any special occasion. My mother answered the door with a quick, tight hug. "You look thin," she said, her standard greeting regardless of my actual appearance. And what did you do to your hair? I touched my recently highlighted brown hair self-consciously. Just some highlights, Mom. It's still mostly the same. My father called from his recliner in the living room rather than getting up to greet me. She's trying to look like those city girls, he said, I's not leaving the baseball game on TV. Probably cost a fortune too. I swallowed my first retort and plastered on a smile, setting the wine bottle on the entryway table. It's good to see you both too. Dinner was my mother's pot roast, my childhood favorite, with mashed potatoes, green beans, and dinner rolls. The conversation remained superficial as we ate. My parents discussed church gossip, neighborhood developments, and my father's upcoming retirement plans. When I attempted to share stories about my promotion or the major campaign I'd recently completed for a national client, they would listen briefly before redirecting the conversation. That's nice, honey, but did you hear that Ellie Thompson's daughter just got engaged? To a doctor, no less. They're planning a Christmas wedding. My mother dabbed at her mouth with a napkin. She's 2 years younger than you, I think. I forced myself to stay patient. That's great for her. Actually, the promotion means I'll be able to finally buy my own place in Chicago. I've been looking at this great condo building in Lincoln Park. Buying property in the city? My father's fork clattered against his plate. That's throwing money away. If you're finally ready to settle down and buy a house, there are plenty of nice places here in Mapleton. The Henderson place down the street just went on the market. Dad, my job is in Chicago. I'm not moving back to Mapleton. A loaded silence fell over the table. My mother busied herself rearranging the food on her plate while my father's jaw worked back and forth, a sure sign of his rising temper. Brooke, my mother finally said, her voice unnaturally bright, why don't you help me bring in dessert? I made your favorite apple pie. In the kitchen, as I gathered dessert plates from the cabinet, my mother spoke in a hushed, urgent tone. Your father and I have been talking, and we think it's time you came home. This phase of yours has gone on long enough. I nearly dropped the plates. Phase? Mom, my career isn't a phase. I just got promoted to senior brand strategist. This is a huge opportunity. Honey, we're worried about you up there all alone. No husband, no family nearby. And the things we hear about Chicago on the news, it's not safe. She cut the pie with sharp, nervous movements. Besides, your father's retiring next year. We thought you could move back, maybe teach marketing at the community college. There's that nice church youth director, Scott, who's been asking about you. I stared at her, speechless. Had they heard anything I'd said over the past 5 years? Did my achievements mean nothing? Before I could formulate a response, she thrust the pie plates into my hands and nudged me back toward the dining room. When we returned to the dining room, my father had removed the dinner plates and sat with his hands folded on the table, another bad sign. In our family, relaxed conversations happened over dessert and coffee while sitting back in chairs. Formal postures meant serious discussions. So, he began as I set the pie in front of him, your mother tells me you're planning to buy an apartment in Chicago. A condo, yes. I carefully served slices of pie, trying to keep my hands steady. With the promotion, I can finally afford to invest in property instead of renting. It's a smart financial move. What's smart, my father said, his voice hardening, would be remembering where you come from and the values we raised you with. This family has lived in Mapleton for 4 generations. I took a deep breath. And I'm grateful for my upbringing, but my career is in Chicago. My life is there now. My mother's eyes welled with tears. You've changed so much, Brooke. We hardly recognize you anymore with your fancy clothes and big city ideas. It's like you're ashamed of us, of where you come from. That's not fair, Mom. I've worked incredibly hard to get where I am. Why can't you be proud of that? Proud? My father's voice rose. Proud that our daughter values money and status over family? That she visits twice a year and can barely stay for a full weekend? That she'd rather live among strangers than come home where she belongs? The conversation was spiraling out of control faster than I could process. This isn't about rejecting you or Mapleton. It's about building my own life. A life without us in it, clearly, my mother interjected, dabbing at her eyes. You've always been stubborn, my father continued, but this is beyond stubborn. It's selfish. Ever since you went to that university, you've had your head in the clouds. I set down my fork, appetite gone. Can we please just talk about this rationally? I love my job. I'm good at it. The promotion is an incredible opportunity that I've worked really hard for. My father's face flushed red. Opportunity? Let me tell you about opportunity. Your mother and I have given you every opportunity. We sacrificed for years to give you a good life, and this is how you repay us? What exactly do you want from me? I asked, frustration building. My mother reached across the table for my hand. We want you home, honey. Where you belong. Your father is retiring next year, and we could use your help. The missing piece suddenly clicked into place. Help with what, exactly? They exchanged a glance that confirmed my suspicion. My father cleared his throat. The plant's retirement package isn't what was promised. Medical costs have gone up. The house needs a new roof. He straightened in his chair. We always assumed you'd move back eventually. Family takes care of family. The truth hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about missing me or worrying about my well-being. They had been counting on me to support them financially. So you expected me to give up my career and move back to Mapleton to, what? Subsidize your retirement? Why didn't you just ask me for help? We shouldn't have to ask, my father snapped. A decent daughter would know her responsibilities to her parents without being told. I pushed back my chair and stood up. I can help you financially without sacrificing everything I built. We can figure out a budget, look at your expenses. We don't want your charity, my father interrupted. We want our daughter back. The real Brooke, not this, corporate version. This is the real me, Dad. The person I've grown into. Why can't you see that? All I see is someone who's forgotten where she came from. He pointed his finger at me. You have a choice to make, right now. Your family or this so-called career. I stared at him, disbelief washing over me. You're giving me an ultimatum? Richard, my mother said softly, maybe we should. No, Diane. She needs to decide. His eyes locked on mine. Either you come home where you belong, or... I waited, heart pounding. Or what? Or you have no home here anymore. His words fell like stones. If that job and city mean more to you than your own flesh and blood, then you've made your choice. The room seemed to tilt. You can't be serious. Dead serious. I won't watch you throw away everything we value. Either commit to moving back by the end of the year, or you're no longer welcome in this house. My mother began to cry in earnest now, but made no move to contradict him. So that's it? After everything I've accomplished, you're just disowning me because I won't give up my career? You're disowning us, my father countered. Choosing strangers over family. I looked from his rigid face to my mother's tear-stained one. Neither showed any sign of backing down. 26 years of being their daughter, and it all came down to this moment. I can't give up everything I've worked for, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I won't. My father stood up, chair scraping harshly against the floor. Then get your things and get out. You have 30 minutes. Richard. My mother gasped, but didn't challenge him. You can't be serious, I repeated, shock numbing my mind. 30 minutes, he said, looking at his watch. Anything you leave behind goes to Goodwill. I stood frozen until my mother's gentle touch on my arm guided me toward the stairs. Brooke, please reconsider, she pleaded as we climbed to my childhood bedroom. Mom, this is insane. He can't just throw me out because I won't abandon my career. He's hurt, honey. We both are. We had such different hopes for your life. My life, I emphasized, pulling my old duffel bag from the closet. Not yours. Mine. I moved through the room in a daze, grabbing photo albums, yearbooks, the quilt my grandmother had made me. My mother hovered, occasionally suggesting items I might want, her voice strained with tears. From downstairs, the ticking clock seemed unnaturally loud. 28 minutes later, I carried 2 bags and a box downstairs. My father stood by the front door, arms crossed. My mother trailed behind me, still pleading in whispers that I should reconsider, that we could work something out. I stopped in front of my father. This is a mistake you're going to regret. The only mistake was letting you go to that university. It ruined you. He opened the front door. Don't come back until you're ready to be part of this family properly. Outside, the summer evening was incongruously beautiful. Fireflies blinked in the yard, and the neighbor's sprinkler made a gentle shushing sound. I loaded my belongings into my car with mechanical movements, feeling my parents watching from the doorway. As I started the engine, my mother rushed out with a container of leftover pie. Please, Brooke. Call us when you're thinking clearly again. I accepted the container but couldn't speak past the knot in my throat. Backing out of the driveway, I caught a final glimpse of my childhood home in the rearview mirror, my father's silhouette in the doorway, my mother's hand raised in a tentative wave. I made it 3 blocks before pulling over, unable to see through my tears. Parked beneath the familiar maple tree where I'd waited for the school bus throughout my childhood, I finally allowed myself to break down completely. The dashboard clock read 9:37 p.m. when I finally regained enough composure to drive. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone, searching for nearby hotels. The Holiday Inn Express wanted $149 for the night. The local bed and breakfast was fully booked. The Mapleton Motel, with its questionable reputation, had rooms for $79. I couldn't bear the thought of staying in Mapleton, where everyone knew everyone. By morning, news of my banishment would spread through church circles and neighborhood gossip. The humiliation would be unbearable. Chicago. I needed to get back to Chicago. My thumb hovered over Allison Reed's contact. My best friend since freshman year of college, Allison had a spare bedroom in her apartment and had always told me I could stay anytime. But this wasn't any time, this was a crisis I could barely articulate. I pressed call before I could talk myself out of it. Brooke. How's the family dinner going? Allison's cheerful voice made the reality of my situation even more jarring. Ally, I managed, my voice cracking. They kicked me out. My parents actually kicked me out. What? What happened? Are you okay? No. Not really. I gave her the abbreviated version, each word painful to voice aloud. Oh my God, Brooke. That's insane. Where are you now? In my car. In Mapleton. Start driving, she said firmly. Come here. The spare room is yours for as long as you need it. I'll have wine and emergency ice cream waiting. Are you sure? It's nearly 10, and I won't get there until after midnight. I'm 100% sure. Drive carefully and text me when you're close. The 3-hour drive to Chicago passed in a blur of tears, angry music, and stretches of numb silence. Interstate 65 stretched before me, a ribbon of asphalt carrying me away from everything familiar toward an uncertain future. I replayed the evening's conversation obsessively, looking for something I could have said differently, some magical combination of words that might have changed the outcome. Rain began to fall as I approached the city, matching my mood. Chicago's skyline appeared through the windshield, illuminated despite the late hour. Usually, that view filled me with excitement and possibility. Tonight, it only emphasized how alone I truly was. Allison lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Wicker Park, in a converted factory building with exposed brick and large windows. By the time I found street parking and lugged my hastily packed bags to her door, it was nearly 1 a.m. She opened the door wearing pajamas and a concerned expression. One look at my face, and she pulled me into a fierce hug. I broke down again, sobbing against her shoulder in the hallway. "Come on," she said gently, taking one of my bags. "Let's get you inside." True to her word, she had wine poured and a pint of chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream waiting. We sat on her couch, me wrapped in a throw blanket despite the summer heat, as I recounted the entire disastrous evening in detail. "I just can't believe they would do this," I said, staring into my wine glass. "Over a job. Over me wanting my own life." "It's not about the job," Allison said thoughtfully. "It's about control. They're losing it, and they're panicking. But to kick me out? To say I don't have a home anymore? It's emotional manipulation, Brooke. They're banking on you being so devastated that you'll give in." I picked at the ice cream, having managed only a few bites despite not having finished dinner. "The worst part is, part of me wants to call them and apologize." "How messed up is that? I didn't do anything wrong." "That's exactly how manipulation works. They've trained you to feel responsible for their feelings." Allison topped off my wine. "When was the last time you made a major life decision without considering their reaction first?" The question hit harder than expected. Every milestone, college choice, job offers, apartments, even haircuts, had been filtered through the lens of my parents' potential disapproval. I'd made independent choices, yes, but always braced for the emotional fallout. "I don't know if I can sleep," I admitted around 3 a.m., exhaustion weighing on me despite my racing mind. "Take my room," Allison offered. "The sheets are clean, and the blackout curtains might help." Despite her generosity, sleep proved elusive. I lay in the unfamiliar bed, physically and emotionally drained yet unable to quiet my thoughts. Around 5 a.m., I reached for my phone and made the mistake of checking Facebook. My mother had posted, "Heartbroken tonight. Please pray for parents struggling with ungrateful children who forget their family values." Already, 17 people had commented with sympathy and prayer emojis. My cousin Melissa had written, "Sending love, Aunt Diane." Some people forget what really matters in life. I felt physically ill reading the comments, watching my reputation being dismantled in real time. These people, family, friends, distant relatives, church members, were forming judgments without knowing what had happened. In their eyes, I was now the villain, the ungrateful daughter who abandoned her parents. As dawn broke, my phone began to buzz with text messages. "Heard what happened? Your mom is devastated. Call them. My Aunt Karen. Whatever happened, family comes first. Don't be stubborn. My Uncle Mike. Your parents have always done everything for you. How could you? My cousin Rachel." Only one message offered support. "This sounds unlike Diane and Richard. Are you okay? Do you need anything? My former high school English teacher, Mrs. Bennett." I turned off my phone, unable to bear more. My stomach churned with anxiety, and my head pounded from crying and lack of sleep. When Allison found me curled on her bathroom floor at 7 a.m., she called in sick to work for both of us and spent the day helping me navigate the initial shock. "First things first," she said pragmatically, "you need clothes and toiletries beyond what you grabbed. We'll go shopping. Second, you need food, actual food, not just ice cream. Third, we need to figure out your living situation." "I can't impose on you," I protested weakly. "You're not imposing. You're my best friend in crisis. But realistically, my place is small for two people long term, so we should start looking at options." The practical focus helped ground me, giving my reeling mind concrete problems to solve. Still, by evening, the emotional toll manifested physically. I couldn't eat the pasta Allison prepared. Sleep came only in fitful bursts, punctuated by anxiety dreams where I was locked out of every building I approached. On Sunday morning, I woke to find several missed calls from my mother. The sole voicemail was brief: "Brooke, please call us when you're thinking clearly. We love you and want what's best for you. This rebellious phase needs to end." Rebellious phase. As if my entire adult life were simply an extended teenage tantrum. The dismissal of everything I'd worked for, my education, my career success, the independent life I'd built, felt like a slap across the face. For the first time, anger began to displace the hurt and shock. And with that anger came the first fragile seed of resolve. Part 5, The Struggle, Following Weeks. Allison's generosity extended beyond that first emergency weekend. Stay as long as you need, she insisted when I brought up apartment hunting on Monday morning. At least until you get your bearings. But living out of a duffel bag on someone else's couch, Allison had insisted I take her bed, but I'd refused after the first night. Quickly became its own kind of stress. Despite her kindness, I felt like an intruder in her space, disrupting her routines and privacy. She never complained, but I noticed her taking more phone calls in her bedroom with the door closed, or texting her boyfriend about changing their date night location to his place. My return to work on Monday brought no relief. The promotion that had triggered this family earthquake now felt hollow. In the sleek glass conference room where the executive team expected a presentation on the Wilson Athletics campaign, I struggled to maintain my professional facade. Brooke? The Q3 projections? My boss Catherine's voice cut through my mental fog. Right, sorry. I fumbled with my laptop, having completely lost track of the conversation. The projections are. I stared at the spreadsheet, numbers swimming before my eyes. Which version had we finalized? What were the key points I needed to highlight? Catherine's concerned frown spoke volumes. This was not the sharp, prepared Brooke Parker who had earned a senior position at 26. This was someone else entirely, someone fragmented and distracted. The week continued in the same vein. I missed deadlines, forgot a client call, and sent an email with glaring errors to our biggest account. Each mistake fed my growing anxiety, creating a vicious cycle of stress and underperformance. Is everything all right? Catherine asked after pulling me aside following a particularly disastrous meeting where I'd contradicted myself multiple times. This isn't like you, Brooke. I considered deflecting but found myself too exhausted to maintain the pretense. Family issues, I admitted. It's complicated. But I'll get it under control. Take whatever time you need, she said, surprising me with her understanding. Just keep me in the loop. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had blown up our relationship over this job, and now my job was suffering because of that explosion. Financial pressure mounted as I began apartment hunting. Chicago's rental market had never been forgiving, but facing it with a need for immediate housing and emotional distress made it doubly challenging. My salary was excellent for someone my age, but I'd been saving for a down payment on a condo, not budgeting for sudden relocation. Each overpriced studio apartment I toured felt like another indictment of my situation. Had I really achieved so much if one family conflict could render me essentially homeless? The security deposits alone would deplete my emergency fund. Sleep became a luxury I rarely enjoyed. Night after night, I lay awake on Allison's couch after she'd gone to bed, scrolling through apartment listings or staring at the ceiling, replaying my parents' words. When sleep did come, it was shallow and plagued by dreams, standing outside my childhood home in the rain, pounding on a door that never opened. Running through Chicago streets trying to reach work while my feet moved through molasses. The physical toll became impossible to ignore. My clothes hung looser within 2 weeks. Dark circles became a permanent fixture beneath my eyes. Even my hair seemed duller, falling out in alarming quantities in the shower drain. You need to talk to someone professional, Allison finally said, 3 weeks into my stay, after finding me crying over a broken mug I'd dropped. This isn't getting better on its own. She was right. Through my company's health insurance, I found a therapist, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, who could see me that same week. The tastefully decorated office with its soothing blue walls became a sanctuary of sorts, the only place where I could fully articulate the magnitude of my grief and confusion. What you're describing sounds like a pattern of emotional control that's been present throughout your relationship with your parents, Dr. Martinez observed during our second session. The dinner confrontation didn't create this dynamic, it just brought it to a breaking point. I considered this, thinking back to childhood moments I'd long rationalized, my mother's silent treatment when I chose debate club over church choir, my father's disapproving comments when I applied to out-of-state colleges, their coordinated guilt trips when I took an internship in Chicago one summer instead of coming home. I always thought that was normal family stuff, I said. Parents want what's best for their kids, right? There's a difference between wanting what's best for someone and demanding they make choices that align with your own needs and worldview, Dr. Martinez replied gently. Healthy parental love includes respect for autonomy. These therapy sessions became anchor points in weeks otherwise characterized by drift and struggle. The clarity they provided couldn't immediately heal the raw wound of rejection, but they offered crucial perspective. By the 5th week, I had reached my lowest point. Allison was clearly struggling with our shared living arrangement, though too kind to say so directly. My work performance remained inconsistent despite my best efforts to compartmentalize. The search for affordable housing had yielded nothing suitable. And most painfully, my parents maintained their position, with my mother's occasional texts always reinforcing the same message: I could end this unpleasantness anytime by simply giving in to their demands. One particularly difficult Tuesday, after a client had harshly criticized my campaign proposal, I found myself in the office bathroom, phone in hand, my father's number on the screen. One call, one concession, and this nightmare could end. I could have my family back. I could sleep in my own childhood bed again. I could stop this exhausting fight. My finger hovered over the call button for what felt like an eternity before I finally put the phone away. Surrendering now would mean erasing not just my career but my identity. Whatever came next, it couldn't include retreating to the person I'd been before. That same day brought an unexpected turning point. Marcus Chen, a colleague from the creative department whom I knew only casually, stopped by my desk. Hey, I know this might sound random, he said, looking slightly uncomfortable, but my sister just moved out of her sublet in Lakeview. It's not fancy, but it's affordable and available immediately. The landlord's a friend of our family. I thought maybe you might be interested? I looked up, surprised. How did you know I was looking for a place? He shrugged. Office walls are thin. I overheard you on the phone yesterday. Sorry if that's weird, but housing in this city is brutal, so I thought I'd mention it. The apartment turned out to be a small one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a walk-up, with a kitchen barely large enough for a cafe table and a living room that would generously be called cozy. But it was clean, in a safe neighborhood, and, most importantly, within my budget and available immediately. The previous tenant left some furniture they didn't want to move, the landlord explained, showing me the modest bed frame, dresser, and sofa. You can use it or get rid of it, up to you. I signed the lease that day, feeling the first genuine relief in weeks. Having a space of my own, a physical home base, provided tangible evidence that I could rebuild. Dr. Martinez helped me recognize this as a significant step. Creating stability for yourself is an act of self-care, she noted in our next session. Now we can work on the emotional aspects from a more secure foundation. Those emotional aspects remained complicated. Each therapy session uncovered deeper layers of the dynamic with my parents, patterns of guilt, obligation, and conditional approval that had shaped my development in ways I was only beginning to recognize. What I'm hearing, Dr. Martinez said during a breakthrough session, is that your worth in your family system has always been tied to your compliance. That's a heavy burden for any child to carry into adulthood. But they sacrificed so much for me, I countered, the familiar guilt surfacing. Doesn't that mean I owe them something? Healthy parents don't keep a tally of sacrifices to cash in later, she replied. They give freely, without the expectation of controlling their adult child's life choices. These insights didn't immediately heal the rift or ease the pain of rejection, but they provided crucial context. I wasn't crazy for wanting independence. I wasn't selfish for pursuing my career. The problem wasn't my choices but the expectation that I shouldn't be making them autonomously at all. With a stable living situation and growing clarity through therapy, I gradually established small daily rituals that helped rebuild my sense of self. Morning meditation. Evening walks along Lake Michigan. Weekly calls with my Aunt Jessica, who had reached out after hearing about the falling out and offered quiet support without judgment. These practices became lifelines, creating structure amid the continuing emotional turbulence. Work remained challenging, but Catherine's patience proved more enduring than I deserved. After I finally delivered a solid presentation for the Wilson Athletics campaign, she pulled me aside. "It's good to see glimpses of the old Brooke coming back," she said. "Whatever you're dealing with, it seems like you're finding your way through it." That vote of confidence, simple as it was, reinforced my determination. I might have lost my family's support, but I still had my professional identity, my capabilities, my resilience. For the first time since that disastrous dinner, I felt a flicker of my former confidence. It was around this time that I discovered an online support group for adult children estranged from parents. Reading other stories, some far more traumatic than mine, others eerily similar, provided another kind of validation. I wasn't alone in this experience, wasn't uniquely flawed or ungrateful. The group's perspective helped me see my situation as part of a broader pattern of family dynamics rather than a personal failure. "The hardest part," wrote one member whose parents had cut contact after she married someone from a different faith, "is recognizing that you can't heal a relationship when the other people believe the only acceptable solution is your complete surrender." That observation crystallized something I'd been struggling to articulate. My parents didn't want reconciliation, they wanted capitulation. Until I could accept that fundamental reality, I would remain stuck in cycles of guilt and false hope. 6 weeks after being expelled from my childhood home, I stood in my new apartment, looking at the simple space I'd created. The furniture was mostly second-hand, supplemented by budget IKEA pieces. The decor was minimal, a few plants, some framed prints, the quilt my grandmother had made. But it was mine. Every choice, from the blue throw pillows to the arrangement of books on the shelves, reflected my preferences alone. For the first time, I allowed myself to see this upheaval not just as a loss but as a difficult form of liberation. The path forward remained uncertain, but I was beginning to trust my capacity to navigate it. The Wilson Athletics campaign launched in early September, 8 weeks after the family dinner that had upended my life. Despite my personal struggles, the campaign rollout exceeded projections, generating substantial social media engagement and early sales increases for the client's new performance were aligned. In the conference room following the launch presentation, Catherine approached me while others filed out. "This is exceptional work, Brooke," she said, indicating the analytics displayed on the screen. "Especially considering what you've been dealing with personally." "Thank you for your patience during all this," I replied, still uncomfortable discussing my situation at work. "Everyone faces difficult times," she said pragmatically. "What matters is resilience. You've shown remarkable strength these past 2 months." Her words affected me more deeply than expected. Throughout my career, I'd received praise for creativity, strategic thinking, and technical skills. But never for personal strength. Perhaps because until now, I'd never truly been tested. That afternoon, I had an appointment with a financial advisor Catherine had recommended. With my living situation stabilized, I needed to reassess my financial planning completely. The condo down payment savings now served as my emergency fund, and I needed guidance on rebuilding security after this upheaval. "Let's look at your complete financial picture," said Michael Rivera, the advisor, spreading spreadsheets across his desk. "Income, expenses, debt, savings, investment potential." For 2 hours, we dissected my finances with clinical precision. The reality was better than I'd feared but more complicated than before the estrangement. I had enough savings to remain secure, but my financial goals required adjustment. "Based on your current income and spending patterns, you're still in excellent shape for someone your age," Michael concluded. "The timeline for property ownership shifts by about 18 months, but it remains achievable." This concrete assessment provided unexpected relief. The financial disruption, while significant, wouldn't define my future. With careful planning, I could maintain independence and continue building security on my own terms. Another significant step forward came the following week when I signed a 1-year lease on my apartment. What had begun as emergency housing now represented commitment to my independent life in Chicago. I celebrated this milestone by painting the living room walls a rich teal, something my mother would have called impractical and my father too bold, and hosting a small housewarming with Allison and a few close colleagues, including Marcus. "It feels good to have people over," I told Allison as we prepared appetizers in my compact kitchen. "Like I'm finally settling instead of just surviving." "You've come a long way in 2 months," she observed, arranging cheese on a platter. "Remember that first night on my couch?" "Vaguely." "I think I was in shock." "You were. But look at you now, apartment, therapy, work success, even throwing parties." "That's not just surviving, Brooke. That's rebuilding." The evening proved more enjoyable than I'd anticipated. Conversation flowed easily, focused on work projects, city events, and future plans rather than my family situation. For a few hours, I experienced normalcy untainted by crisis, a reminder that life continued to offer connection and pleasure despite profound loss. Marcus stayed behind to help clean up after others departed. As we washed dishes side by side, he mentioned casually, my parents had certain expectations about my life too. Engineering, medicine, or law, those were the only acceptable paths. "What happened when you chose advertising instead?" I asked. 3 months of silent treatment followed by years of passive-aggressive comments at family gatherings, he said matter-of-factly. "They've mostly accepted it now, but holidays still include at least one 'when are you getting a real job' conversation." His understanding, offered without prying for details about my own situation, created an unexpected sense of kinship. Before leaving, he suggested a coffee shop near our office where he often worked on creative projects. "They have great pastries and don't mind if you camp out with a laptop all afternoon." Sometimes a change of environment helps with perspective. This casual invitation led to occasional weekend work sessions where we'd review campaigns, discuss industry trends, and gradually share more personal stories. These meetings remained professional but added a welcome dimension to my slowly expanding social life. The most significant development of this period, however, came through continued therapy with Dr. Martinez. As my immediate crisis stabilized, our sessions shifted from emergency emotional management to deeper exploration of family patterns and identity formation. "I've been thinking about something you said last week," I told her during a particularly productive session. "About how children often internalize their parents' expectations as their own voice." "Yes, it's a common pattern," she nodded. "Have you noticed examples of this in your own thinking?" "Constantly," I admitted. I realized I've been carrying this idea that success means getting married by 30, buying a house in a good school district, having 2 kids by 35, this whole life blueprint that isn't actually mine. It's what my parents wanted for me. "And what does your blueprint look like?" she asked. The question stopped me short. Despite years of ostensibly independent living, I'd never fully articulated my own vision untethered from parental expectations or reactions. "I'm not entirely sure," I said slowly. "But I know it includes creative work that matters to me. Living in a city. Travel. Maybe marriage and children eventually, but not on someone else's timeline." "That awareness is significant," Dr. Martinez noted. "Many people never distinguish between inherited expectations and authentic desires." This conversation initiated a period of intense self-discovery. I began journaling regularly, documenting not just daily events but examining long-held assumptions about success, relationships, and personal fulfillment. Which values truly resonated with my authentic self? Which had I adopted to please others or avoid conflict? Around this time, an unexpected ally emerged. My mother's sister, Aunt Jessica, called one evening after not hearing from me for several weeks. "Your mother told me what happened," she began cautiously. "Or her version, anyway. I'd like to hear yours, if you're willing to share it." I hesitated, wary of family politics, but something in her tone suggested genuine concern rather than information gathering. Over the next hour, I explained the confrontation, my parents' ultimatum, and the aftermath. Unlike others who had immediately taken sides, Aunt Jessica listened without judgment. "I'm not entirely surprised," she said when I finished. "Your mother and I grew up with similar dynamics. Our parents were extremely controlling, especially with her as the oldest." "Mom never talked about that," I said, surprised. "She wouldn't. She sided with them against me when I moved to Indianapolis for college. History repeating itself, I suppose." This revelation shifted something fundamental in my understanding. My mother's behavior wasn't simply about me, it was part of a multi-generational pattern she herself had experienced and then perpetuated. "Does knowing that make it hurt less?" Aunt Jessica asked gently. "Not really," I admitted. "But it helps me see it differently. Less personal, more systemic." "For what it's worth," she added before ending the call, "I think you're handling this with remarkable grace. And I'm here if you need anything, no judgment, no reports back to your parents." This conversation provided something essential that had been missing: family connection without toxic conditions. Aunt Jessica's support created a bridge between my past and present selves, suggesting that family relationships could exist without requiring the surrender of my autonomy. Professional advancement continued to provide another form of validation. In early October, Catherine assigned me to lead our agency's pitch for Meridian Outdoor, a major potential client. The assignment represented significant trust in my capabilities despite recent performance issues. "You have a unique perspective on their target demographic," Catherine explained. "And honestly, Brooke, adversity often sharpens creative thinking. I've seen it happen before." The project demanded intense focus, comprehensive research, and innovative strategic approaches, exactly the consuming professional challenge I needed. For the first time since the estrangement, I found myself working late by choice rather than avoidance, energized by creative problem-solving rather than depleted by emotional management. The Meridian presentation succeeded beyond expectations, securing a 2-year contract worth millions for the agency. The CEO's email congratulating the team specifically mentioned my insightful consumer journey mapping and authentic brand positioning. This professional victory coincided with another personal milestone, my first therapy session without tears. The pain hadn't disappeared, but its acute edge had dulled enough to allow more objective reflection. Dr. Martinez noted this shift as significant progress. "Grief doesn't end," she explained, "but it transforms. You're moving from crisis response to integration." "Integration sounds better than getting over it," I said. "Because I don't think that's possible." "Nor would it be healthy," she agreed. "Complete detachment would deny the importance of these relationships in shaping who you are. The goal isn't forgetting but contextualizing, holding the pain while continuing to build a meaningful life." As fall deepened in Chicago, my apartment increasingly reflected this integration process. I'd created a gallery wall featuring both new art purchases and family photos, selective images capturing genuine moments of connection rather than formal portraits that had projected family perfectionism. My growing stability allowed for careful social expansion beyond work relationships. I joined a book club, reconnected with college friends I'd neglected during work-focused years, and even went on a few casual dates arranged through apps, experiences that felt refreshingly normal after months of crisis management. One such date with Ryan Miller, a high school science teacher, evolved into regular meetups over board games, museum visits, and coffee shop conversations. Unlike previous relationships where I'd carefully managed my family's involvement, I approached this connection with transparent boundaries from the start. "My family situation is complicated right now," I explained during our third meeting. "I'm not in contact with my parents currently." "Family dynamics can be tough," he replied without pressing for details. "My approach is that adults get to decide what relationships work for them." His matter-of-fact acceptance of my boundaries, no prying, no attempts to fix the situation, created space for connection untainted by the family drama. By November, 5 months after being ejected from my childhood home, I had established a functioning adult life entirely independent of parental support or approval. The achievement felt both empowering and sobering. Evidence of resilience alongside persistent grief for what had been lost. The most definitive test of this new equilibrium came at Thanksgiving, traditionally a family-centered holiday we'd always celebrated in Mapleton. As the date approached, my anxiety spiked despite therapeutic progress. Dr. Martinez helped me develop concrete plans for the difficult day: morning volunteering at a community meal service, afternoon video call with Aunt Jessica, evening dinner with Allison's extended family who had kindly included me in their gathering. Creating new traditions doesn't erase the pain of broken ones, she acknowledged, but it does affirm your capacity to build meaning beyond that loss. On Thanksgiving morning, my mother texted, "We miss you at the table today. The door remains open when you're ready to come home." The message carried the same conditional welcome that had characterized all communications since June. Reconciliation offered only on terms that required surrendering my independence. I responded simply, "I hope you have a good day. I'm doing well in Chicago." This brief exchange, while painful, demonstrated my growing emotional strength. I acknowledged the connection without either burning bridges or sacrificing boundaries, a balance that would have been impossible months earlier. The volunteer work that morning provided unexpected perspective as I served meals alongside others, creating community outside traditional family structures. Allison's family dinner offered warmth without the underlying tension that had characterized my own family gatherings. Between these events, I spoke with Aunt Jessica, whose traditional pecan pie recipe I'd attempted with limited success in my small kitchen. "The first time I made Thanksgiving dinner after the rift with your grandparents, I cried into the stuffing," she confessed. "But it gets easier. You build new connections, new traditions." "Does it ever stop feeling like something's missing?" I asked. "Not entirely," she admitted. "But the missing piece becomes proportional. It doesn't define the whole day anymore." That night, lying in bed in my teal-walled apartment, I realized how far I'd come from the broken person who had sobbed in Allison's spare room 5 months earlier. The pain remained, but alongside it had grown determination, clarity, and authentic connection. For the first time, I could envision a future not defined by this rupture but incorporating it into a larger life narrative, one where losing my childhood home had ultimately led to building something more genuinely mine. The unexpected confrontation came on a Tuesday afternoon in mid-December, 6 months after the family dinner that had changed everything. I was reviewing client materials with Marcus in the agency's glass-walled conference room when Catherine appeared at the door, expression unusually concerned. "Brooke, your parents are in reception," she said quietly. "Security called up. They're insisting on seeing you." The conference room seemed to tilt momentarily. "My parents? Here? Now?" "You don't have to see them," Catherine assured me. "Security can escort them out if you prefer." Marcus gathered his materials. "I'll give you space to decide." Alone in the suddenly silent room, I felt the familiar anxiety surge, racing heart, constricted breathing, the urge to either flee or capitulate. But beneath these reactions, something new emerged: resolve. Whatever this confrontation entailed, I would face it as the person I'd become, not the daughter desperately seeking approval. "I'll see them," I told Catherine when she returned. But in the visitors' lounge, not my workspace. The small sitting area near reception offered minimal privacy but maintained professional boundaries. As I approached, I saw them through the glass partition, my father standing rigidly by the window, my mother perched anxiously on a leather sofa. They looked simultaneously familiar and foreign, like figures from a life I'd once inhabited but now viewed from a distance. My mother spotted me first, rising immediately. "Brooke, honey. You look thin. What are you doing here?" I asked, remaining standing despite her gesture toward the adjacent chair. "We've been trying to reach you," my father said, his tone accusatory rather than concerned. "You've barely responded to your mother's messages." "I've been clear in my responses," I replied evenly. "I'm not ready for a relationship on the terms you're offering." This nonsense has gone on long enough, he continued as if I hadn't spoken. Your mother is worried sick. It's Christmas in 2 weeks. We're here to bring you home. The presumption that months of silence could be erased by seasonal obligation, that home remained their exclusive territory to grant or withhold, might once have weakened my resolve. Now it only clarified the dynamic. Dad, I built a life here. A good one. I'm not coming home because this is my home now. This isn't about your apartment, my mother interjected tearfully. It's about family. About where you belong. I agree it's about belonging, I said carefully. But belonging can't be conditional on surrendering my independence. My father's face flushed with familiar anger. So this promotion, this fancy office, these city people, they're more important than your own flesh and blood? That's not what this is about, and I think you know that. I maintained eye contact despite my racing heart. This is about whether I'm allowed to be an adult with my own choices. We've supported every reasonable choice, he countered, voice rising. But this obsession with career over family isn't reasonable. It's selfish. Several colleagues glanced toward the lounge, drawn by his volume. Catherine appeared in the doorway, expression questioning. I shook my head slightly, indicating I didn't need intervention yet. I need to get back to work, I said, determined to maintain composure. This isn't the place for this conversation. Of course, my mother said bitterly. The precious job comes first. Always. The job isn't the point, I replied, frustration finally breaking through. The point is respect. Respect for my choices, my independence, my life. I built something here that matters to me. If you can't see value in that because it doesn't match your plan for me, that's not something I can fix. A heavy silence followed, broken only when Catherine approached with deliberate professionalism. Mr. and Mrs. Parker, I'm Catherine Miller, Brooks department head. I need to ask you to continue this conversation elsewhere. Brooke is a valued team member, and we have client deadlines this afternoon. My father looked as if he might argue, but my mother placed a restraining hand on his arm. We're staying at the Marriott downtown until Friday, she told me. Please call us. We just want to work this out before Christmas. After they departed, I remained in the lounge, hands shaking despite my outward composure. Catherine sat beside me. Take whatever time you need, she said. Family situations can be complicated. I'm sorry about that, I managed. I had no idea they were coming. No apology needed. For what it's worth, you handled that with remarkable poise. I returned to my desk eventually, though productivity proved impossible. The confrontation had shaken me more than I wanted to admit, resurrecting old patterns of guilt and uncertainty. That evening, I called Dr. Martinez for an emergency session. They're trying to force a resolution on their terms, she observed after I recounted the encounter. The timing, Christmas, showing up at your workplace, these aren't coincidental. They're tactical. I felt so conflicted, I admitted. Part of me still wants to fix this, to have my family back. That's natural, she assured me. The question isn't whether you want resolution, but what kind of resolution would be healthy for you. This framing helped clarify my thoughts. What would healthy reconciliation actually look like? Not capitulation, certainly. Not pretending the rupture hadn't occurred. Perhaps something more nuanced, acknowledgement of harm, establishment of boundaries, rebuilding of trust through consistent respect rather than shared DNA alone. The following evening, after considerable reflection and preparation with Dr. Martinez, I called the hotel. My mother answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting by the phone. Brooke. I'm so glad you called. Your father's just stepped out for dinner, but... That's okay, I interrupted gently. I've been thinking about your visit. If you're serious about working things out, I'd like to suggest a family therapy session. Silence stretched across the line. Therapy? Brooke, we don't need strangers involved in family matters. I disagree. I've been in therapy since June, and it's been tremendously helpful. Dr. Martinez has experience with family estrangement and could facilitate a conversation with boundaries and structure. I don't see why we can't just talk directly, she protested. Family problems should stay in the family. That approach hasn't worked for us, I pointed out. If we're going to rebuild any kind of relationship, we need neutral ground and professional guidance. After further resistance, she reluctantly agreed to discuss it with my father. The next morning, she called back with tentative acceptance. Your father isn't comfortable with this, but he's willing to try if it means bringing you home for Christmas. I let the bringing you home assumption pass for now. I appreciate that. I'll arrange a session with Dr. Martinez tomorrow afternoon if that works for your schedule. The family therapy session proved even more difficult than anticipated. Dr. Martinez's office, normally a safe space, felt charged with tension as my parents sat stiffly on the sofa across from my usual chair. After introductions and explanation of ground rules, Dr. Martinez opened with a neutral question about each person's hopes for the session. I hope to understand how we can move forward as a family, I began carefully. To establish a relationship based on mutual respect rather than conformity to expectations. My mother spoke next. We want our daughter back. We want to heal whatever misunderstanding led to this situation. Richard? Dr. Martinez prompted my silent father. I'm here because my wife insisted, he said flatly. But I maintain that families don't need outsiders telling them how to communicate. From this inauspicious beginning, the session deteriorated further. Despite Dr. Martinez's skilled facilitation, my parents repeatedly circled back to the central narrative. I was being selfish, ungrateful, and rebellious. They were concerned, loving parents whose reasonable expectations had been rejected. Any attempt to discuss the controlling dynamics or conditional support met with denial or deflection. We've only ever wanted what's best for you, my mother insisted tearfully after I described the emotional impact of their ultimatum. But who decides what's best? I countered. That's the fundamental issue. I need to make my own choices, even if they're different from what you would choose for me. Choices have consequences, my father responded coldly. If you choose a life contrary to our values, you can't expect us to support it. Dr. Martinez intervened. It might be helpful to distinguish between supporting a choice and supporting the person making that choice. Parents can disagree with adult children's decisions while maintaining connection and respect. My father shook his head dismissively. That's modern nonsense. Family has obligations. Respect means honoring those obligations. As the session neared its end, the impasse remained unbroken. Dr. Martinez suggested homework, reflection questions about boundaries, autonomy, and family roles, but my father's expression made clear his low opinion of such exercises. In the waiting room afterward, my mother made a final plea. Please come home for Christmas, Brooke. We can keep working on these issues, but don't punish the whole family by staying away for the holidays. The framing was telling, my absence as punishment rather than consequence, reconciliation as my sole responsibility. Despite the session's failure, it had clarified something essential. Meaningful reconnection would require fundamental shifts in perspective that my parents currently seemed unwilling or unable to make. I won't be coming to Mapleton for Christmas, I said finally. I'm not ready, and I don't think you are either. We'd just be pretending nothing happened, and that wouldn't help anyone. My mother's face crumpled. My father turned away, jaw tight with anger. When you're ready to build a relationship that includes respect for my independence, I continued, I'm open to trying again. I love you both, but I can't keep sacrificing my well-being for your comfort. They departed the next day without further contact. The finality of this encounter brought both grief and clarity. Dr. Martinez helped me see that while the door to reconciliation remained theoretically open, I needed to proceed with my life without waiting or hoping for their perspective to change. Their response or lack thereof is outside your control, she reminded me. Your healing doesn't depend on their participation. The professional sphere continued to provide contrast to these family struggles. The agency's holiday party fell in the week following my parents' visit. Catherine took the opportunity to publicly recognize our team's successful Meridian outdoor pitch, calling me to the front to receive particular acknowledgement. Brooke Parker exemplifies the resilience and creativity that define our agency culture, she announced to assembled colleagues. Her leadership on the Meridian campaign demonstrated extraordinary strategic thinking and client understanding during a year of remarkable challenges. The recognition, coming amid familial rejection, carried powerful validation. My professional identity, the very aspect of myself my parents had dismissed as a phase or obsession, was not just acceptable but celebrated in this community. The weeks surrounding Christmas proved predictably difficult but navigable with preparation. I joined volunteer efforts at a local shelter on Christmas Eve, spent Christmas morning on video call with Aunt Jessica, and attended dinner with Ryan and his roommates, a casual gathering of holiday orphans that felt refreshingly free of familial tension. Ryan and I had been dating casually for nearly 2 months by then, our relationship developing slowly but steadily. Unlike previous relationships where I'd anxiously managed family impressions, I approached this connection with transparent boundaries from the beginning. My family situation is complicated, I'd explained early on. We're currently estranged. I'm working through it in therapy, but it's not something I can neatly resolve or pretend doesn't affect me. His response had been reassuringly straightforward. Family stuff is rarely simple. I appreciate you telling me, and I'm here to support however makes sense for you. This straightforward acceptance of complexity. No pressure to reconcile, no judgment about estrangement, no simplistic solutions, created space for authentic connection. By early January, what had begun as casual dating had evolved into something more meaningful, characterized by mutual respect for boundaries and independent identities alongside growing affection. January also brought a career development that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Catherine invited me to co-present at a national marketing conference in March, featuring our Meridian outdoor campaign as a case study in authentic brand positioning. It's a significant professional opportunity, she noted. And frankly, Brooke, your journey this year demonstrates remarkable personal leadership. That perspective is valuable to our industry. As winter deepened in Chicago, I continued building a life aligned with my authentic values rather than inherited expectations. My apartment evolved from emergency housing to true home, filled with objects and arrangements that reflected my preferences rather than parental approval. Weekend brunches with friends, evening phone calls with Aunt Jessica, regular dates with Ryan, these connections formed a support network based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The 1-year mark of my estrangement approached with a mixture of sadness and pride. Dr. Martinez suggested marking the anniversary intentionally rather than allowing it to arrive as an ambush of grief. Acknowledgement can be healing, she advised. Consider a personal ritual or meaningful action that honors both the loss and your growth since then. After consideration, I decided to write my parents a letter, not for sending but for clarity. The process took several drafts spread over multiple therapy sessions, but the final version represented my most honest articulation of boundaries and hopes. Dear Mom and Dad**. A year has passed since the dinner that changed our relationship. In this time, I've built a life in Chicago that brings me genuine fulfillment, professional growth, meaningful friendships, and growing self-knowledge. While I remain open to rebuilding our relationship, I want to be clear about what that would require*. I need acknowledgement that my life choices, while different from your preferences, deserve respect. I need recognition that adult children are not extensions of their parents but independent beings with their own valid perspectives. I need acceptance that love without conditions is the only foundation for healthy family relationships*. I understand these requirements may feel foreign or uncomfortable given our family history. I've learned through therapy that patterns of control often extend across generations, and I recognize the ways similar dynamics shaped your own upbringing*. My door remains open to a relationship that includes mutual respect and appropriate boundaries. I miss you and love you, but I cannot sacrifice my well-being or authenticity to maintain connection. The choice now rests with you, not whether I'll return to Mapleton and abandon my career, but whether you're willing to relate to me as the adult I've become rather than the child you expected me to remain. With love and hope. Brooke. I sealed the letter and placed it in my desk drawer, not mailing it but preserving it as testament to my growth and clarity. Whether my parents would ever be ready to hear these truths remained uncertain, but articulating them represented significant healing regardless of external outcomes. In late February, I received an unexpected email from my mother, the first communication initiated by either parent since the failed therapy session in December. Brooke. Your father had a minor heart procedure last week. Nothing serious, routine stent placement. He's recovering well but has been instructed to reduce stress and improve his diet. I thought you should know. He probably wouldn't want me telling you, but family should know these things regardless of disagreements. Mom. The message carried no guilt trip or demand for response, a small but noteworthy shift from previous communications. After consultation with Dr. Martinez, I replied with simple concern. Thanks for letting me know. I'm glad the procedure went well and hope his recovery continues smoothly. Please keep me updated if anything changes. This brief exchange, while far from reconciliation, opened a narrow channel of communication untethered to the central conflict. Over subsequent weeks, my mother sent occasional updates about my father's recovery, local news, or neutral family information. I responded with similar restraint, acknowledging messages without either reopening wounds or pretending they didn't exist. Dr. Martinez viewed this development optimistically. It suggests your mother may be approaching a place where connection without control feels possible. That's significant progress, even if limited. What about my father? I asked. His journey may take longer, or follow a different path entirely, she acknowledged. Some parents never fully accept their adult children's autonomy. Your healing can't depend on his timeline. As spring approached, bringing the anniversary of my estrangement into sharper focus, I realized I'd navigated a full-year cycle of holidays, birthdays, and seasonal transitions without my parents' presence. The absence remained painful but no longer dominated my emotional landscape. What had once felt like an open wound had gradually transformed into a tender scar, present but no longer bleeding, a marker of both injury and healing. On a clear April morning, I finally mailed a version of the letter I'd drafted months earlier. Not as ultimatum or demand, but as honest invitation to a different kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than hierarchical control. Whether they would accept remained uncertain, but extending the possibility represented my own healing journey's progress. The response, when it came 3 weeks later, was my father's handwriting on plain stationery, brief but unprecedented in its tentative openness. Brooke. Your mother shared your letter. Some points I disagree with, others I'm thinking about. The heart situation has changed some perspectives. If you're in the area for Memorial Day, we could talk. Just talk, no expectations either way. Dad. This cautious invitation carried no promises of fundamental change, no guarantee of understanding. But in its careful neutrality, its absence of demands or guilt, it offered something new, the possibility of relating as adults with separate perspectives rather than authority and subordinate. Whether this opening would lead to meaningful reconciliation remained to be seen. But standing in my Chicago apartment, surrounded by the life I'd built through crisis and determination, I recognized that the outcome no longer defined me. Whatever came next, gradual reconnection, continued distance, or something between, I would face it not as a daughter seeking approval. 2 years after that life-altering family dinner, I stood in my Chicago apartment, not the emergency sublet or even the one-bedroom walk-up, but a spacious 2-bedroom condo in Lincoln Park with tall windows and a small balcony overlooking the neighborhood. The journey from that night of rejection to this moment of genuine stability had been neither linear nor simple, but the contrast was undeniable. My professional trajectory had continued upward, with the Meridian Outdoor campaign winning an industry award and leading to my promotion to Creative Strategy Director, the youngest person to hold this position in the agency's history. The role brought greater responsibility but also increased flexibility and creative control, allowing me to mentor junior team members while continuing to develop innovative approaches for our most challenging accounts. I'd made a conscious effort to use my experience as a resource for others facing similar challenges. Once a month, I volunteered with a local organization supporting young adults transitioning from difficult family situations to independent living. Many participants came from more overtly abusive backgrounds than mine, but the core challenges, establishing boundaries, building self-worth separate from family approval, creating support systems, resonated across experiences. The most important thing I've learned, I told a group during a workshop on emotional independence, is that healing isn't about forgetting or pretending the pain doesn't exist. It's about integrating that experience into a larger life story without letting it define every chapter. My relationship with Ryan had deepened gradually into a partnership based on mutual respect and shared values. Unlike previous relationships where I'd anxiously managed family impressions, our connection had developed outside the shadow of parental approval. When he proposed the previous autumn, a simple, heartfelt question during a weekend hiking trip rather than an elaborate production, the decision felt clearly our own rather than filtered through family expectations. The emerald-cut engagement ring caught the morning light as I arranged flowers on the dining table. We'd chosen to host a small engagement dinner that evening for our closest friends, including Allison and Marcus, who had recently begun dating themselves. My relationship with my parents had evolved into something neither fully reconciled nor completely estranged, a careful, structured connection that acknowledged both the lasting bonds of family and the permanent changes wrought by the rupture. The tentative Memorial Day conversation my father had proposed 2 years earlier had led to irregular but increasingly substantial interactions. Progress came unevenly. My mother adapted more readily to our new dynamic, gradually accepting that my life in Chicago represented authentic fulfillment rather than rebellion. My father struggled more visibly with the loss of authority, occasionally lapsing into old patterns of judgment or control before catching himself. Both parents had attended one additional session with Dr. Martinez during a visit to Chicago the previous year, not miraculous in its outcomes but meaningful in their willingness to engage on neutral territory. They had met Ryan during that same visit, a carefully planned dinner at a restaurant rather than either of our homes, maintaining boundaries while allowing connection. They would not be attending the engagement dinner tonight. That level of integration remained premature. But my mother had sent a handwritten card with sincere congratulations, and my father had added a brief note expressing hope to get to know Ryan better. Small gestures, but significant in their restraint from either criticism or excessive enthusiasm. Aunt Jessica, however, would be present, having flown in specifically for the occasion. Her consistent support throughout the estrangement had created a different kind of family connection, one based on mutual respect and genuine interest rather than obligation or expectation. She had become a bridge between my past and present selves, honoring my history without demanding I sacrifice my growth. As I completed preparations for the evening, I reflected on the less visible but equally significant transformations of the past 2 years. Therapy with Dr. Martinez, now reduced to monthly check-ins rather than weekly necessity, had helped me recognize and reshape deeply internalized patterns of seeking external validation, measuring my worth through others' approval, and prioritizing harmony over authenticity. The apartment itself testified to this growth, decorated neither in reflexive opposition to my parents' taste nor anxious alignment with it, but in genuine expression of my own aesthetic preferences. Books displayed without concern for others' judgment of their content. Art selected for personal resonance rather than conventional approval. Space arranged for comfort and function rather than presentation. My phone chimed with a text from Ryan, picking up Jessica at airport. See you and the cheese board at 6. The casual intimacy of this message, its assumption of shared responsibility and mutual support, contrasted sharply with the hierarchical dynamics that had characterized my family relationships. Later, as our small gathering of chosen family filled the apartment with conversation and laughter, I found myself observing the scene with dual awareness, appreciating the present joy while acknowledging the complicated path that had led here. Allison catching my eye across the room, her smile carrying the memory of that first desperate night on her couch. Marcus raising a toast that tactfully acknowledged challenges overcome without detailing them. Ryan's hand finding mine under the table during Aunt Jessica's heartfelt speech. These connections had not replaced what was lost. The grief of family rupture remained a real, if transformed, presence in my life. But they had created something equally valuable, relationships founded on choice rather than circumstance, maintained through authentic exchange rather than obligation, celebrating growth rather than compliance. The most profound lesson of the past 2 years had been this distinction between houses and homes. My parents had withdrawn access to my childhood house as leverage, believing it represented my only option for belonging. In doing so, they had inadvertently pushed me to create something more authentic, a home built from chosen connections, personal values, and hard-won self-knowledge. This realization didn't erase the pain of rejection or the complicated emotions that still surfaced around holidays and milestones. But it provided essential context for understanding both the loss and the unexpected gifts that had emerged from that difficult night. Being forced out of what I thought was my home had led me to build something more genuine, a life that truly belonged to me. The boundaries established through crisis had ultimately created space for healthier connections with both my parents and others. The professional identity my parents had dismissed as temporary distraction had provided not just financial independence but meaningful contribution and creative fulfillment. The family we choose and the boundaries we set are the foundation of the home we build within ourselves. That evening, after our guests departed and Ryan and I cleaned up together in comfortable silence, I stepped onto the small balcony with a cup of tea. Chicago's skyline glittered against the night sky, a constellation of lives and stories unfolding in countless windows. Somewhere in that landscape was my first emergency sublet, Allison's apartment where I'd broken down that first night, the office where I'd faced my parents' confrontation. Each location marked a point in my journey from crisis to resilience. The path forward would continue to hold complexity. My parents and I would likely never return to our pre-estrangement relationship. Too much had changed on both sides. But perhaps we could build something new, with clearer boundaries and more authentic connection. Whether that possibility fully materialized remained uncertain, but I now faced that uncertainty from a position of strength rather than fear. If you've experienced family estrangement or difficult boundaries with loved ones, I hope my story offers some comfort in knowing you're not alone. Have you had to rebuild after a family rupture? What helped you find stability during the process? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories about navigating complex family dynamics and building independence. Remember that your worth isn't determined by others' ability to recognize it, and healing doesn't require erasing your boundaries. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength in creating your own path forward.